His consistency is going to do well today.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and jump into game one of day 2. Thanks for walking on that journey with me, Bryce and Frodan. Go ahead and take the game away.
All right, so thank you very much. Welcome, everybody, to Game 1, Lobby A of Day 2 of the Mid Set Finale. We are hopping on board with the point leader currently and yesterday. It is Chakki, who you may have seen him in previous games when he was competing in Hearthstone or as a current Hearthstone game developer. But that's right, in his spare time, he loves competing, and here he is on the biggest stage, crushing it against North America's finest. To take a look at his opening, he has an early vest and a Nunu. When we look at Chakki a little bit in depth, Bryce, is there anything that particularly impressed you yesterday when you were watching his games?
It felt very, I mean, look, yesterday he impressed me with his high rolling, right? Like yesterday was a day that everything was coming up Chakki. He was hitting the units he needed to. He was hitting early dragons a lot. He was playing very well, though. He was very solid. All of his decision making made sense. Oftentimes when you study TFT, you see quite a few mistakes, even from some of the top players. And Chakki didn't feel like he was particularly error prone. He felt like he was completely in control of his game plan from start to finish of the day, and the points absolutely reflected that.
Yes, one thing that Bryce and I has caught our attention, when you watch Chakki play, there's just a lot of logic and strong reasoning behind his decision making. Now, here comes a decision, 2-1 augment. Starts off with Cavalier Crest, which really caught my eye. Mirage is Warlord's Honor, so a very viable Mirage that you can play around. So he ended up going for anything else differently. I think if he had another guild unit, he could consider whether or not he wanted to play Loot Master. I do think that is an underrated augment. But Cavalier Crest is just so good, very flexible, and you don't even necessarily have to commit fully to the Mirage if the stars aren't aligning for it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised he did not instantly pick that. Personally, I would have taken that to the bank and ran with it. He has the early Nunu out of the box, so powerful because he's already got a couple of fight wins under its belt, so it's got a couple of Warlord stacks already. He's got the ability to slam a static Shiv, which in addition to being an outstanding tempo item, is really solid on Deja, and then he can play around that armor, potentially going for Sunfire Cape onto the Nunu, and if he gets those conditions met, then there's a really high chance he's able to win streak throughout Stage 3, or Stage 2. Going up against PockyGom, who has an incredibly powerful board of his own, though. An upgraded set, a Sunfire Cape already slammed, plus he's got that portable Forge item giving him the Black Cleaver, which is, a lot of early value shredding these resistances.
Yeah, that's right. It's just the idea that he has a lot of tempo on his side. Chakki has good pieces, just not a lot of upgrades, and so unit quality. Sometimes your attack and health is just bigger, something that Chakki knows a lot about. As we take a look at another person of interest in this lobby, it's K3 Soju. With a Titanic Strength and a Bruiser setup, and that very early Titan's Resolve slam. Now switching it over to Ezreal. What do you make of his position here, Bryce?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, Titanic Strength basically means we go one of two ways, right? We'll play around Siphon carry or we'll play around Olaf carry. No early Olaf would mean that I would probably lean towards Siphon from this spot. But it's a little bit hard to say. Oftentimes you do want to go to a more vertical Bruiser setup because Titanic Strength is buffing your AD based on your Bruiser's HP, which means more Bruisers, more HP, therefore more AD. So I probably lean towards Siphon from this spot, but I think you can play either, especially if he hits an early Olaf.
We'll see. I mean, there's a lot of versatility with how you used to be able to build those old Bruiser boards. We've seen people even utilize this kind of augment into Assassin Siphon. And I feel like with Soju, one of the things that differentiates him from players in other tournaments is Soju is willing to take those risks in events. Almost to a fault at times where it can blow up in his face. Ooh, another Silas here. But yeah, it feels like it can blow up in his face gloriously and lead to many memes in chat. That's what makes him such an interesting and cool player to watch, even in these competitive environments. And he tweaks with that playstyle. Sometimes he dials up his risk taking to 11 and says, you know what, I'm just going to go for that fast 9 and just play 1-star legendaries, hope I stabilize. And sometimes he's just going to be really aggressive. And that unpredictability, I mean, just look at the way he's shifting his board round after round. He went from 2-star Karma to 2-star Ezreal to now playing around this trainer instead. He's just so flexible with how he approaches every stage of the game, which is what really defines his playstyle.
Yeah, it is, and it oftentimes makes sense. He does wind up making some mistakes, right? He can be error-prone because he does play a little bit kind of by the seat of his pants. He's such an intuitive player that sometimes he makes decisions and you you cover your eyes and you go, oh no, Soju, not like this. But I like the way he's played this early game so far. It seems like we are, no early Olaf with the Titanic Strength, with the Titan Slammed. It feels very clear what our direction is going to be, which is Siphon. He gets the early Trainer in, plus he has a Tristana pair, so there's a lot of potential power on Soju's board. He's also very comfortable playing from Lost Streak.
Speaking of Lost Streak, that is a Lost Streak for Milk, by the way, only losing by a couple of units, or 1 unit rather, in a couple of fights. As we take a look at the augments, 3 portable forges, true 2s from Milk, a Dragonmancer emblem from Stellar Minhee. All right, looking forward to see what that's going to happen. And then Ascension. Ascension's actually, data-wise, one of the worst performing augments this tournament right now. Shout out to Mindful One, who in collaboration is with the tournament organizers is putting out some great data sheets. Ascension averaged a 4.93 over 15 picks yesterday, Bryce. That is atrocious. His top 4 rate was 28%. Now, that might be a lot of numbers that's throwing out there, but the thing that I focus on is it just doesn't seem like that good of a generic pick. What it's telling me is Ascension is pickable in certain situations, but not as ubiquitous as it used to be.
Yeah, and it's been struggling a little bit on ladder. Certainly the data hasn't been that bad, but I think that's indicative of the tournament quality of lobbies. When you're in tournaments, there's just that much more pressure. People aren't making mistakes. It's just a lot of consistently correct decision making, and so it's harder to get away with because fights are not lasting as long. You don't play as many weaker boards as you otherwise would have. People are really maximizing their value, so I'm not surprised to see Ascension struggling, although that data is, truly awful.
It's terrible. But does that mean that you can't pick it? Absolutely not. I mean, heck, in certain comps that we see developing here in this game, you might even see an Ascension pick. So don't judge a book, or an augment rather, by its cover. We'll see whether or not anybody will be leaning that way. And also, talking about the augment, we've mentioned Stellar Minhee, a player that's going under the radar, had a pretty reasonable performance yesterday. And also starting off on the Dragonmancer emblem, just a trait in general that I think people have really written out of their minds unless they're going to hard force one of the legend compositions. We'll see if Stellar ends up going for that legend, or perhaps even something up their sleeves. There's a couple of Dragonmancer builds out there that people still aren't playing very much.
Yeah, we saw one of them yesterday, right? We were talking about Bertosaurus's board. He was lost streaking. He didn't have the optimal items to play around the Volibear or Nivea legend board, and so he went for a 6 Dragonmancer Ao Shin line instead and did really well, piloted to a 2nd place. So a couple of options there for Stellar Minhee. It'll be very fun to kind of check in on his game as he goes. We joined PockyGom, our only 100 HP win streaker. We saw his board on 2-1, and we knew that it had the bones of a very strong stage 2, and this is Pocky doing what Pocky does. He's really good at playing creatively and getting win streak going up against DQA's board. There's some damage left for DQA here. This Skarner 2 could do a little bit of work. The Heimer 2, not as scary without the Mage trait. Just not going to be very effective as a unit on DQA's board. So it looks like PockyGom is going to be able to take care of business here and maintain his 100 HP streak.
Man, is it me, or when Set doesn't have a Ginsu's Rage Blade, it makes it visually feel like he's hitting harder because it's so slow.
Yeah.
He's doing this very slow motion uppercut into the stomach of Skarner. It's like, great board here in start for PockyGom as he has a 2-star Leona and Tarek. Just a really strong front line. And again, good board building 101. Understanding what is the unit that's the most powerful, which is Set 2. How do you anchor it, give him the items, and surround him with Guardians that will give him that extra shield whenever they drop past that HP threshold. Only person streaking. The only thing is, I don't know what direction he's going to go in. I think PockyGom could play literally anything in the game. What comp doesn't want anti-heal? What comp doesn't want shred and a little bit of extra boost through Hand of Justice? I think PockyGom's probably not even sure where he's going to land this game.
Yeah, he's not sure, and that's part of what makes Pocky fun, right, is that he's one of the players that is going to be the least linear in his paths to getting wherever he wants to go. Speaking of linear paths, we know exactly where Kurumx is going. We did not see how long he has had this Olaf, but he was sacrificing it onto the Krugs, which means he intends to play around it for the entire game. He's got the early 4 scale scoring in. Would love to know how much AD he has on that Olaf, but it's a solid position for Kurum to play around the scale scoring board, which has come back into the meta. We didn't see it a ton yesterday, but we did see a meaningful amount of success in a lot of different games when it was played.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and he does have this Randuin's Omen as well to give that the extra magic and armor resistance. It's good for a comp that wants to engage quickly because you have so much resistances, and you should be able to withstand a lot of damage early on. Funny enough, this Olaf might be one of the last units to die. But yeah, I think Kurum is in a pretty decent spot. I do worry about what his next few augments are, because I do feel like Olaf and Scale Scorns do require some augments. I don't think that you can just play it generically in any kind of augment lobby setup. And then on top of that, you need some good matchups. If there's a lot of Jade in the lobby, you're going to be hurting.
Yeah, that's for sure the case. We take a look at these augments. None of them are particularly good here. CB1 feels pretty weak to me overall as an augment. Exiles 1 is fantastic, but it synergizes horribly with his Randuins. Weak Spot is also fantastic, but he has a Sunfire Send already. I probably would pick Weak Spot instead of re-rolling a Silver Augment, just because I'm always worried about getting augment screwed in my final augment of the game, but I could see a re-roll here being viable because none of these are optimal for his board spot.
Yeah, I like the weak spot a lot, and I actually think it's quite strong. Yes, you do lose a little bit of that value because of that Sunfire Cape, but if you actually kind of think about the way his dynamic's going to work out, he's actually going to be burning the back line more than the front line, and the weak spot will be engaging quickly in the front line. So it actually might work out okay. And I think that this is something that people have to understand. You can't always in TFT get max value, right? And this applies to Sunfire Cape, this applies to things like Locket or even Zeke's when you're playing like best friends. Just give it up a little bit sometimes and try to make sure that you're picking strong options throughout the game. I think Kurm has made an excellent choice here.
Yeah, I definitely agree with this choice overall. Going up against another board that looks like they rolled a little bit.
Wow.
So we saw Kurum roll, and we saw this board, Soju's board, is got the Silas too. Maybe he didn't roll. Maybe he just hit all the different things. He's got Tristana 2. He's got a Silas 2 as well. It's a very expensive board for Soju and another tough loss for Kurum.
It's tough, but his big roll, when Kurm's not rolling at 6, that means he's going to roll at 7. Scale Scorn has a couple of intervals. 6 is mainly for the Braum and Lilia. 7 is more for Olaf and Diana, which he's clearly angling for, on top of the Siphon that he might inevitably pick up. We'll see. Amde is the player that we're looking at right now, has a 2-star Karma trying to carry and a reasonable board, but it's kind of surprising to see how little HP he has. I know he still has a lot of gold, implying he hasn't rolled very much, but I still feel like his board should be killing off more units. It could be the fact that he just hit it. So let's see how he goes against Kurum's board. Kurum does not really have the DPS to get through the front line very quickly. In fact, his Yone 2 is doing a great job just sustaining, even with minimal amount of synergies. And so this is a really good turnaround for Amde. He's won 2 in a row, took a massive beating in Stage 2 through lose streak. And if he can streak and then continue to streak all the way through the end of Stage 3 after Carousel by leveling, he'll be in a pretty good spot going into Stage 4.
Yeah, it is a pretty good spot. You know, a relatively close fight win and a great time to play Kurum's board. You can see at the top of your screen all of those pairs for Kurum. He has a pair of basically his entire board at this point, so it's a tough spot for Kurum. And if Amde can get a couple more wins and a Deja on his 4-1 roll down, then he is bing chilling. Great spot for Amde overall. Taking a look at the augments here, silver all the way around. Anything jumping out? Pocky took featherweights.
Yeah.
What is happening there?
Interesting. Very interesting choice from PockyGom to choose featherweights. It's a silver augment. Maybe he's just trying to make set really strong. I do know some people who take featherweights so that they can effectively not roll until level 8 or even level 9. And then just ditch the featherweights later stage in the game and maybe have it only on 1 unit. The other person of interest is Stellar Minhee, who took Axiom Arc 1. And just for reference about Axiom Arc 1, it is one of the worst performing silver augments you could possibly take. And yet, Stellar Minhee says it complements my Dragonmancer board because if I'm going to be playing Dragonmancer is, by definition, a hyper carry composition, which means 1 unit will be getting those kills, getting those resets, getting that mana. Or at least that's the hope. We'll check back in again with Stellar Minhee, but what an exciting development over there.
Yeah, normally silver augments are not particularly exciting. We did see a really fun recombobulator spot into a Talon 3 yesterday, and I would love checking on both Pocky and Stellar Minhee's boards because those are not picks that you see every day, and be cool to see if they're able to make them work. Speaking of making it work, Amde levels to 7 here, trying desperately to protect this 3 streak, and gets that 4 Mirage trait online, which means that if he gets another win, it's extra Warlord stacks for those units. Pretty close, but he's able to get a fight win here against Soju.
Huge.
Likely a level diff, so very clean from Amde.
Huge for Amde. Amde needs to win one more, and his game will basically be flawless at this point, which is huge. A very stage 2 and stage 3 lays the foundation of what placements you can even compete for in the later stages of the game. Checking in with DQA, a play that we've highlighted before, does have good pieces in place. Looks like he's angling for this 3 trainer whispers mage setup. Just needs to win out, but with 2 other streakers, Amde and PockyGom in his pool, who's he going to go up against? It's Amde, so the winner gets to keep their streak for stage 3. A Leona top right to try to bait a little bit of aggression in the front end of things. Does Karma get enough damage done? But those are some really powerful D-skills items onto the Siphon to amplify the damage. I just don't think Amde has enough to take things down quickly. Ascension kicks in. As you can see, the Karma's Flare not able to get it done, and DQA will be the one holding on to the streak. The last thing I want to say is PockyGom also still perfect thus far, but the way Pocky's fights are going, I'm noticing that his fights are ending quickly, Bryce. That means his board is commandingly strong. He's winning fights before people even can get things like Ascension online.
Yeah, and I highly doubt that he's playing around 1 cost or 2 cost reroll with that featherweight, so he's purely using it for tempo, really just kind of flexing his TFT muscles. He is such a strong player. It's an augment that not a lot of people are interested in picking when they're not playing reroll, and Pocky understands, hey, it's silver, so I can afford to sack it later. It's not like being down a silver augment at the end of the game is a disaster, because the overall power level is pretty low. And he's got the streak, so he's already paid for itself and then some with the damage he's done to the lobby and the extra economy he's been able to get. Stellar's board, meanwhile, getting ready for a big transition, does have the Ornn, so has the ability to play the Legend board. Ornn is the unit that really unlocks it. The 4 cost, harder to find. There's the Anivia as well, so he's got all of the Legend units. Actually, no Volibear yet, I speak too soon, so he's going to roll an Aushin, so he can theoretically play the board that Burt played yesterday if he wanted to. A Bard as well. Kind of crazy, some of these legendaries he's hitting. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. I think, given the circumstances, we don't even have Volibear. If you're talking about what's better, 1-star Aushin with Dragonmancer versus 1-star Anivia, I think the answer is clear.
Swain.
Looking for 6 Dragonmancer, finds it! Gets it in at the last second, just in time. Can play Jewel Gauntlet. Takes this Morello. Probably Ashe is the best applier of Morello in the back. Because of her volley spreading very wide radius.
Get it in. Wow. Just leaving the Morello on the bench for this turn. Clearly a little bit of dizziness and focused purely on getting the board in. This Aushin is going to cast, but not enough frontline to hold up here. And that's a big loss for Stellar Minhee. We saw Burt stabilize this board yesterday, but he stabilized it on level 8, not level 7. He had a lot of gold to work with in doing that, so I am certainly fearful of Stellar Minhee's ability to get this done. Wow, instantly rerolls.
Instantly reroll. We already have Jewel Gauntlet, so Jewel Lotus is a lot weaker. Second Wind is what's really interesting to me, as well as Big Friend. Oh, we're going back towards the Legend line. Okay, so this was not what I was necessarily expecting, and it makes sense of why he didn't commit to his items. But if he knew that he was going to be going for this, then I would probably have slammed the Morello on the Aushin just to have that temporary HP plus extra ability power. Hits a 2-star Ornn.
Oh,
and now we're in business. I think this board now has some serious chops.
Yeah, these shops are crazy, by the way. It feels like he's getting a legendary like every single time. He desperately needs to find this Anivia 2. Big spike there at the end, hitting that Anivia 2, this frontline Anivia. If you have not seen it before with the legend, look out. We are in for a fun ride. Watch this Anivia DPS. He gets completely surrounded on the board. This unit casts once, it does big damage, casts a second time, and basically kills the entire enemy board. And this is just such a fun composition. You have a range unit in the front line, taking advantage of the high base damage along with the Jeweled Gauntlet because there's so much ability power from the 6 Dragonmancer.
Yeah, the only issue is that a lot of times you want healing because you deal so much damage, and the Anivia drops, your entire team loses. So you have to try to protect her. You often see that being the case. And Stellar Minhee is doing okay for now, but we'll check back in with them later. So we also want to take a look around what's happening in this lobby. Milk has Deja 2, and he's fairly wealthy. This is a really powerful spot. The only thing is his augment setup isn't particularly super strong. Stand United is to get a lot of value, so Hallucinate's pretty much his main combat augment. And it only lasts for 5 seconds, which means that you're going to be good against front-loaded damage boards, like those that had Devastating Charge, for example. We'll see how good his position can be as he goes up against a very tanky Silas 2 with Eternal Winter. This is the natural counter to Deja. If they don't have Quicksilver, look, can't even get ready to cast, and it's almost 15 seconds in the fight.
Yeah, so tough, and this matchup can be really rough because you just leave this Deja on an island in the backline, so it's always going to eat that backline CC, but the healing comes out. There's so much. Is it able to heal and sustain through? No, not quite enough. DQA taking a fight win. Milk's still in a pretty good spot, I would assume. If he can hit some upgrades, if he can hit a Yasuo, then he should be solid for top 4. I mean, just hitting the Deja 2 in the beginning half of stage 4 with that much money left over, pretty good spot overall. Taking a look at these augments, we see a Devastating Charge from Chakki. 2 Hallucinates, actually. Amde went that way as well. Soju grabbing the Gadget Expert. That's what's jumping out at me. It feels like we're going to have a lot of Deja contest here. I'll be curious to see if Chakki was able to actually hit that Deja 1 to stabilize. Same thing with Amde.
Take a look at a separate board here of what Soju's being able to put together, and it looks like a Soju board. It's not entirely the conventional way you approach things. Bruiser Mage, as he does have that extra +1 from the hard. Finds Deja. How can he utilize this Bruiser and the Titanic strength if he's going to go into Deja? It feels like it's pretty much just Siphon or bust here. He doesn't have time to Siphon. That's really big. Can get it in time, and also just, take it slowly. You don't have to full pivot into like the 6 Bruiser and keep rolling. Like, he obviously, if he had more time, be able to get it down. I like this controlled, laddered approach from Soju as he goes up against PockyGom, who has a 2-star talent with Frozen Heart and Obsidian Cleaver. Shatter of Soul should be applying all of that magic shred, and I don't know if Soju's Siphon can match up against a Siphon 2 here from Pocky. Pocky dealing some big damage, and as we were predicting, has that featherweight pretty much sacked just to get him to this stage. Let's take a look at Milk, who did manage to get that win. RFC, the last 3rd item of choice to give him some initial front-loaded damage to complement the Warlord stats.
Yeah, Soju definitely not out of the woods. That first Siphon pickup is massive. He's going to get to position his board properly now. He also got another upgrade onto his Nomsy, so his board state feels pretty good overall. He would love to have that Siphon 2 that Pocky has, and if so, then his board would probably be more than sufficient to be stable to stage, but not a lot of HP to work with, only 31. We're starting to see some clear separation at the bottom. We've got Amde and Stellar way down at the bottom. We've got Chakki and Soju at right around 30, and then everyone else is 45 or above.
Up against DQA, who still is streaking, doing a fantastic job, and is so scary because his Nomsy is about to hit level 4 after the fight. So you would think that this is a good time to play DQA, but it really still is not, because he just has so much CC and sustain with that Zoe in the back. And no combat augments, no problem. DQA wins so convincingly, dealing critical damage to Soju, who's racing Stellar Minhee for 8th place. And that is just such bad news because so many players in this lobby want Siphon currently.
Yeah, we've got 3 Deja players and 3 Siphon players in this lobby, so if you're off of one of those lines and you're able to hit, it should be in very solid position. We know Kurumx is off of that line because he's got the scale scorns rolling, but that's the only player. Oh, and we've also obviously got the Dragon Mitzer player, but that has not been going very well. So, yeah, the meta of this lobby at least feels very well established, and we've got the haves and the have-nots. You've got, Milk and Pocky that have already upgraded their Dragon, are playing around, and then it feels like everyone else is kind of in search of those upgrades.
Soju trying to figure out how he can utilize this combination of items. I wonder if Giants is going to go on Corki and instead put a defensive item onto this Siphon, because he's playing now Cannoneer with a Bruiser frontline. And while the stats on say it's pretty good, he has a bunch of 1-star units. Okay, Lulu 2 certainly helps, but have to get rid of his Sona in order to do it.
He doesn't have mages in either, right? He wants this Corki wants to become a Zoe so badly.
Mm-hmm.
Just
that's
a tough.
entirely it, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a tough spot for Soju. I promise he does not want to be playing around this Corki. I know we saw the stats at the top of the show about how well Corki was performing overall, but that's different conditions, right? I assure you. Dan was talking about the importance of playing it from ahead. Soju's behind. I promise you those Corkis had a lot better itemization than Soju's been able to put together, and he's just missing the key units here. He hasn't gotten the mages to tie together his front line, so his Silas is instantly dying. His Corki doesn't really do anything. Corki won with just that Shiv, and he has the Siphon one as well. And really bad news for Soju is that he goes up against Stellar, who he wanted someone else to kill, but Soju is too weak to get the job done himself. So he takes that L and might be going for 8th place here. And we see a really close fight between Amde and DQA. Where is this win slash going to go? Okay, there we go. Is this Sona game able to cast? Not in time. The full crit damage build from Amde, so powerful when you're on the Warlord because you get so much base AP and the critical strike can amplify off of that.
Kurumx has hit Diana 3. The lobby is starting to heat up. As you see Stellar Minhee on your screen just now, level to 8. To play a Soraka with a Tactician's Crown. So this is effectively a level 9 board. And Stellar Minhee has reasonable amount of power. The orange at 2-star, and the Nivea's at 2-star, but I can't help but notice that a lot of the other Dragonmancers are 1-star, and that just adds up over time. Each star level of your collected Dragonmancers makes that Nivea that much stronger. Chakki with the Devastating Charge is going to be able to take out most of the supporting cast, and it really just comes down to whether or not this Nivea can get it done, and this Yasuo with the Cavalier Emblems is doing a lot of work, and it can get down to an execute. This would be game over for Stellar Minhee then.
Oh!
Yasuo ends up dying. And I think that might do it. I don't think Volibear 1 can get it done despite the low HP on both sides, unless...
Is this cast? Oh! So close, but Soju has Stellar. Soju goes out in 8th place, Stellar out in 7th. Such a crazy close fight, and Chakki is duct taping this game together with the Devastating Charge, being able to hit that Yasuo so big, but no Dejas for Chakki. I promise that was part of his game plan.
At least ideally so. The way his itemizations has panned out has actually been quite good, even for Lilia, which is part of the reason why she's such a good setup into it. She's a Cavalier that can bridge into the Nunu and the Cavalier starts, but also can hold exactly this, the Deja type item. Going up against Amde, he's a Shroud down the middle, but not onto his most important units. He's going to try and see if he can get past his front line. Does have a couple units working onto the Deja in the back line. The Wind Blast is aiming away from them, but not eliminating them fast enough. Lilia trying to see if he can continue to crack through, and now here comes a Devastating Charge and a big convincing victory. Amde dies out of nowhere, and just like that, the cavalry has arrived. And that is the power of Devastating Charge. Sometimes you win the fight in a blink of an eye. Is Kurumx going to be okay as well? Looks like at worst he's going to still stay alive just barely, even if he loses, as he does end up getting the dub. So we have our top 5 secured. Amde not able to repeat the magic and momentum that was happening yesterday.
Yeah, that's okay, though. Actually, in some ways, you could say he is replicating it because he struggled in games 1 and 2 yesterday and then popped off games 3 through 6. So totally fine here. Nothing to panic about for any of the players who have already been eliminated. Taking a look at our lobby complexion, we know Kurumx is on the scale scoring board. It feels like it's not the strongest iteration. You were talking about the importance of augments, and none of these augments are screaming scale scores to me, so it's just not a great spot for Kurumx. Trying to keep it together. Chakki, if he can find his way into a top 4 from here, would be very impressive. Meanwhile, we saw Milk now streaking with that Deja board. DQA likely gotten to level 9 and trying to cap out around that heavy 3 trainer board that he's been investing in so much from the beginning. Kurumx 1 Olaf. Mortdog not like this.
I mean, I don't know if Kurum's board is even weak, though, without this Olaf 3. It still has a Diana 3, and he has a Randuin. It's going up against the Ghost of what looks like to be Milk's board, because he moved that RFC onto the Leona.
Leona 1. Whoa.
Just temporary placeholder. I'd be hard-pressed to imagine that's where it stays long-term.
Yeah, that wants to be Yasuo, I would assume. But, you know, Leona getting the job done with that Hallucinate, is able to sit there and auto-attack with that RFC for a while. The Deja in the backline is DPSing away, but here comes the Olaf. The Wind Blast comes out, but it's not enough damage. Kurumx is able to get a fight win here. Fortunate getting to play the Ghost, because that fight was pretty close. I'm not sure he beats Milk's actual board. Can he find this Olaf 3? It would be such a big deal.
definitely did, and that is the brutal nature of being contested. Even if Chakki isn't trying to take all the Olafs for Olaf 3, the fact that he has any Olafs makes it that much more difficult to maintain. I do like this off-center A1 positioning from Braum just to kind of pull units away and set up for his positioning as a possible move. Kurumx does switch sides at the last second, going against Chakki, who has essentially all but backline. It's a devastating charge. The fight of Scale Scorns. Whose Scale Scorn will reign supreme? The X Factor being the Yasuo, trying to go for a big cast. Diana able to at least withstand with the shield. The Olaf now directly onto that Yasuo. I don't know if Chakki has enough DPS, but he's able to get it done. It was so close. Came down to the final bit of autos, and the resets for Chakki was just too good. He's on a streak. Kurumx is now at just 5 HP and likely to bot 4 unless he can leapfrog Pocky.
Yeah, if he can somehow hit this Olaf 3, it would be such a big deal, because that fight was definitely an Olaf 3 diff. Chakki's devastating charge board just puts together enough damage across all of the different units. That's the fun thing about these devastating charge boards, is like he's still carrying a Lily at 2 with 3 items, but it's actually putting in a meaningful amount of work because of the devastating charge augment. So Chakki is the only player actually win streaking on that board. Very, very well played game from him. Kurumx is just trying to find any way he can into the top 4, and I think absent the Olaf 3, I just cannot imagine him being able to do it.
I mean, we'll see. Maybe a duplicator just drops straight up. Silver orbs. That's still a chance that it happens in stage 5. Does not get it. 18 gold. A few rolls in a dream.
Oh.
Wait, we switched away.
Oh no, that's okay. It's a level 9 transition for DQA. We talked about that he was going to be the person in a position to get to level 9 and cap out his board. We're transitioning to an Aoshin trainer board, sticking with the 3 trainer. Okay, he's going to drop it down. He's got that Nomzi in the back, doesn't want to invest the extra unit at level 9. This is a very, very strong iteration of an Aoshin board. If he's able to stall long enough for this Aoshin, which he ought to be able to do because he has this Nomzi 4-star in addition to these heavily itemized bruisers going up against Kurum's Ghost. The Aoshin is not where he wants to be.
No, so maybe the hope that the Ghost board is weaker in some capacity.
Oh, the Sona!
Oh, and the Zoe end up casting Kale's invulnerability, so looks like everything is A-okay. And even if Aoshin died, I think the sum of the parts are still really strong, right? The Silas was still far from dying, and it's still Nomzi at 4-star. Kurumx bites the dust, unable to get that Olaf 3, but hey, a 5th place, considering the circumstances where he was contested and could have easily gone off the rails. I think that's okay for Kurumx. If he goes 5th, 4th all day and then has one really solid placement, that should get him into enough for day 3.
Yeah, he is totally fine. Chakki still win streaking, surprisingly. I'd be curious to see how he fares against DQA's board, because it feels like DQA has become the strongest in the lobby. Milk, if he's able to hit some Yasuos, could get to that peak power potential. Also, somewhere Asa is screaming, get this Nomzi in the front line, DQA. Nomzi 4 has a crazy amount of tank stats, so it is really wild that he's keeping it so far in the back line. And wow, Chakki finds a Yasuo 2. His board got a lot scarier since the last time we were there.
Absolutely. And again, the Cavalier Emblem allows him for a ton of resets. And the Aoshin Lightning Ring is coming in. But it's just barely tickling the Yasuo. And now here comes Sweeping Blades. Tries if he can end the fight. Zoe trying to keep it in. And Yasuo's not even targeting the right thing with his Sweeping Blades.
The next cast. The rain. He's got it.
All right. Well, Chakki's streak has been snapped. Pocky does take a loss to Milk. Milk board looks fearsome indeed, and one glimpse of Pocky shows you what he eventually landed upon, and also explains why he has such a good matchup versus players like Kurumx. That Jade is really powerful to withstand it. Xiaoyu is very good into melee compositions in general because of the damage reduction and the true damage right back. Not to mention the Mystics reducing that scale score and percentage damage. Let's see if that's enough against Chakki's board with Devastating Charge. Hopes that enough tankiness is onto this Nico. Chakki does have that Yasuo too, and that board looks very fearsome. All hands on deck. Can Xiaoyu and Nico get it done? A big blossom from Nico to try and stun the units for just half a second. But I worry about the DPS remaining here for PockyGom as well. Xiaoyu's Jade form going toe-to-toe with Yasuo versus the Sweeping Blades. It seems like more skill score units are living, and I don't think Pocky has enough oomph, especially after this last cast. An admirable job to get to this top 4. PockyGom will take it. And Chakki with the top 3 with his pivot into this devastating charge off the Deja and just playing a standard 4-scale scoring with no 3 stars.
Yeah, definitely not his original game plan, but been very impressive from Chakki. Yes, he hits the Yasuo 2 at level 8, which is what's putting him in contention to potentially win this lobby, but he put himself into top 4 from just playing great team fight tactics, so really nice game from him so far. Will he be able to potentially position differently and deal with DQA's board? DQA hits the Aoshin 2. That is very scary. We're seeing Milk's board for the first time in a little while. Still no Yasuo. He has a Leona 1 with an RFC and a Runin's Hurricane. Definitely not what he is hoping for. He has to give up. He can't find his Yasuos. Here's Milk at level 9. No Yasuos. There's Chakki at level 8. 3 Yasuos. Sometimes Mortdog is just cruel.
Yeah, Mortdog giveth and taketh away. I like his positioning. Third away from... Oh, but the Zephyr Cheese from DQA to land it onto the Deja, not to mention the Shroud. And the CC Chain, plus the Orange Stampede. Can this Deja play the game just naturally accrued mana simply because of how many hits she was taking? But here comes another double crescendo. And Deja, you tried, but you are not allowed to play, says DQA. Now we have the 1v1. Chakki has snuck up into the top 2. Arguably the best played game from his spot relative to the kind of position that he was in. I don't think most people would look at this board and say this is a board that can beat the Aoshin. But we've been seeing Chakki surprises time after time. I wonder if he's got anything up his sleeve here.
Yeah, I wonder if he's got anything up his sleeve as well. It's really hard because of the Cavalier emblem on the Yasuo. It's going to dash towards nearest unit, which will always be some of these frontline units. So DQA keeping his entire backline away and saying, hey, Yasuo, have fun dealing with this frozen, the Eternal Winter in the front line and the Namzi, and I'll just keep the rest of my units away. Plus the double Zeeks on the Thieves' Gloves roll for this Aoshin. It is auto-attacking so much faster than normal. It is going to get its cast off much faster in this fight. And here comes the rain. So much damage pouring out from DQA. The Yasuo is dead. Chakki is dead as well. Beautifully played game from DQA to take game number 1 of day 2.
That was insane to see.